Welcome back to Silent Conspiracy. Picture this. It's 1820, and you're a merchant traveling through the dense forests of central India. The sun is set, and your group settles around a crackling fire. Friendly strangers who joined your caravan offer to share their meal and entertain you with songs. Their leader, a charismatic man with a yellow handkerchief tucked into his belt, regales everyone with tales of distant lands. You feel safe, protected by numbers and human companionship. But as you drift off to sleep, you have no idea you've just shared your final meal with Thug Behram, history's most prolific serial killer, in that yellow. Handkerchief is about to become the last thing you'll ever see. I think this is the story of a killer whose reign of terror spanned 50 years, whose victims numbered in the hundreds, and whose very name gave birth to the English word thug. Tonight, we delve into the dark world of the Thuggee cult and the man who mastered murder like no other human being in recorded history. Born around 1765 in the Oudh region, Behram entered a world where murder was not just a profession, it was sacred duty. The Thuggee cult, dating back to the 13th century, was far more than a criminal organization. They were religious zealots who believed they were doing Goddess Kali's divine work by strangling travelers as sacrifices. According to Thuggee legend, Kali once battled a demon whose blood spawned new demons wherever it touched the ground. Exhausted, Kali created two men and armed them with rumal's sacred handkerchiefs, instructing them to strangle demons without spilling blood. When their mission was complete, Kali commanded them to keep the rumals and use them to destroy every man not of their kindred. For young Behram, this wasn't mythology, it was his birthright. Born into a family of hereditary thugs, he was destined from childhood to become a devotee of Kali and master of the rumal. His apprenticeship began early. Watching his father and uncles practice their deadly craft on practice dummies made of straw and cloth, learning the precise pressure points and angles required for silent, bloodless death, Behram's initiation into the cult would have followed ancient rituals that bound him to Kali forever. As a young man, he underwent tests of loyalty and skill. Learning the Thuggees' secret language called Ramasi, their complex system of signs and signals, and most importantly, the precise technique of strangulation. The ceremony itself was shrouded in secrecy, conducted in remote temples where new initiates swore blood oaths, never to reveal the cult's methods or membership. Behram's weapon was deceptively simpler yellow and white silk handkerchief weighted with a silver medallion. But in his hands, this innocent cloth became an instrument of death more efficient than any sword or gun. He could cast the rumal with such precision that the medallion would land exactly at his victim, Adam's apple, adding crushing pressure as he pulled the silk tight. The technique required years to master. Too loose, and the victim would escape. Too tight, and the struggle would alert others. What separated Behram from ordinary criminals was his religious conviction. He genuinely believed every person he strangled was a sacred offering to Kali, preventing her from destroying humanity. Each murder, in his twisted worldview, delayed the goddess's apocalyptic arrival by 1,000 years. Before every killing expedition, Behram would perform elaborate pujas, seeking Kali's blessing and guidance for the murders to come. By the 1790s, Behram had become a Jemadar, a thug leader commanding respect and fear across central India. His gang operated with military precision, each member playing specific roles in their deadly theater. Some served as Southeast charmers who infiltrated groups of travelers, gaining trust through shared meals and entertaining stories. Others acted as Bertowets, the actual stranglers who struck without warning when signaled. There were also Thuggees, who buried the bodies, and Thuggees, who acted as scouts and lookouts. Behram's territory stretched across the most prosperous trade routes, from Delhi through the Vindhya Mountains. His gang would join merchant caravans, posing as fellow travelers, seeking safety in numbers. They could maintain their disguise for weeks, becoming trusted companions who shared food, stories, and road dangers. Behram himself was a master actor, able to assume the persona of a wealthy merchant, a humble pilgrim, or a learned priest, depending on the situation. The psychological manipulation was as sophisticated as the physical violence. Thugs would study their intended victims for days, learning their habits, fears, and weaknesses. They would tell carefully crafted stories designed to make travelers feel secure while subtly isolating them from potential help. A favorite technique was to convince victims to camp in secluded spots, claiming knowledge of bandits on the main roads. For decades, Behram moved through India like a ghost, leaving behind only mysteriously vanished travelers and terrified whispers. His gang grew to include over 200 members, making it one of history's largest criminal enterprises. They had established safe houses, corrupted officials, and received protection from landlords paid percentages of their loot. The Thuggees followed elaborate rules. They wouldn't kill women, children, musicians, lepers, or Europeans. Rules designed to avoid attracting too much attention. They operated during certain seasons and followed complex rituals before and after each expedition. These restrictions weren't born of mercy, but of pragmatism. Missing women and children would be noticed more quickly. Killing Europeans might bring British military intervention. Behram's success lay not just in his killing technique, but in his organizational genius. He developed an intelligence network that spanned hundreds of miles, with informants in markets, inns, and temples who would report on wealthy travelers and their planned routes. His gang used coded messages and secret symbols carved into trees to communicate across vast distances, creating what was essentially India's first organized crime syndicate. By the 1820s, British East India Company officials were receiving increasing reports of missing persons along major trade routes. The economic impact was becoming serious enough to threaten British commercial interests. Entire merchant families were disappearing, trade volumes were declining, and insurance rates were skyrocketing as Lloyd's of London began to view Indian routes as uninsurable risks. In 1830, Captain William Henry Sleeman was appointed to investigate what initially seemed like isolated highway robberies. Sleeman, a methodical administrator with a talent for detective work, began to piece together a pattern that horrified even colonial authorities accustomed to India's violence. What he discovered was not random banditry, but a coordinated campaign of murder spanning multiple states and involving thousands of perpetrators. Sleeman's breakthrough came in 1835 when he captured Feringheya, one of Behram's associates who agreed to turn King's evidence. Feringheya led Sleeman to mass graves containing nearly 100 bodies and began revealing the scope of the Thuggee conspiracy. The captured thug described a shadow society that had operated for centuries, with its own laws, territories, and chain of command stretching from the Himalayas to the Deccan Plateau. What Feringheya described was not mere banditry, but a religious cult that had systematically murdered travelers for centuries. For the first time, the British realized they were dealing with history's most successful serial killing organization. That made even the most notorious European criminal gangs look like amateur thieves. Armed with information from captured thugs, Sleeman launched the most extensive manhunt in colonial Indian history. The campaign involved thousands of soldiers and administrators in a coordinated effort to destroy the Thuggee cult entirely. Sleeman established a specialized court in Sagar, now Sagar, that would try captured thugs, and created the first criminal database in Indian history, cataloging names, aliases, and physical descriptions of suspected cult members. Behram, now in his 70s and known as the King of the Thugs, managed to evade capture for 4 years. But age and relentless pressure finally caught up with him. In 1839, at age 75, he was arrested in Jabalpur, the same city where Sleeman had established his anti-Thuggee headquarters. His capture came not through detective work, but through betrayal by a former associate seeking to reduce his own sentence. When confronted with evidence, Behram made a decision that secured his place in criminal history. He confessed. The numbers he revealed staggered investigators. Behram claimed to have been present at 931 separate murders and to have personally strangled 125 people with his own hands. The precision of Behram's confession suggested a man who kept meticulous mental records. He could describe individual murders from decades earlier, naming victims, locations, and accomplices with startling accuracy. British officials initially suspected exaggeration, but cross-referencing with other captured thugs confirmed many of his claims. More disturbing than the numbers was Behram's complete lack of remorse. When asked if he felt guilt, he reportedly replied that he was merely following Kali's commands and that each murder had been sacred duty. He seemed genuinely puzzled by British obsession with what he considered religious observance, comparing his killings to a priest performing daily prayers. On February 1840, Thug Behram was executed by hanging in Jabalpur, ending the most prolific criminal career in recorded history. His death marked not just one killer's elimination, but the effective destruction of the entire Thuggee cult. Under Sleeman's campaign, Over 1,400 thugs were hanged or transported for life. The Guinness Book of World Records officially recognizes Behram as the most prolific murderer in history. Modern historians estimate the Thuggee cult may have killed between 500,000 to 2 million people over 6 centuries. Behram's 931 murders represent less than 1% of the total. Yet his systematic approach made him the most infamous. Nearly 2 centuries after his death, Thug Behram continues to fascinate. Was he a religious fanatic driven by genuine belief, or a psychopathic killer using religion to justify bloodlust? Some scholars argue the British exaggerated Thuggee crimes to justify colonial expansion. Others point to consistent confessions and mass grave discoveries as evidence the threat was real. What remains undisputed is that Behram represents something unique: a killer who operated on unprecedented scale over 5 decades, who viewed murder as religious duty, and who created an organization functioning as both criminal enterprise and death cult.
As
we look back on Behram's blood-soaked legacy, we're left with a chilling thought. Could another Thug Behram emerge in our modern world? Could religious fanaticism, charismatic leadership, and organizational genius once again combine to create history's next most prolific killer? Perhaps the most disturbing aspect isn't the number he killed, but how easily ordinary humans can be convinced that murder is sacred duty, that violence is worship, and that systematic destruction of human life can be justified as divine will. What do you think? Was Thug Behram a monster driven by bloodlust, or a deeply religious man carrying out what he believed were divine commands? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this journey into history's darkest chapter left you questioning the nature of evil itself, hit that like button, subscribe to Silent Conspiracy, and ring the notification bell. Next time we'll explore another case, proving sometimes the most dangerous predators hide behind righteousness.